if this open air marketplace exists. So I don't know. Logistically, I don't know how you gather that information. That seems kind of difficult. But I think that's something to take into consideration as well. I know just anecdotally, I have not really heard any negative feedback from residents about this. And if I have, it's probably been far and few between. So that's a good sign.
Yeah,
But
I mean, anecdotally, from what we hear from the customers is that they love it. They're excited when it comes back. There have been, from on a resident perspective, some like there has been. I just talked to somebody on East Minor Street who's concerned about the traffic flow of people diverting and they're coming up East Market to kind of get around the closure as well, and as well as a person who's on the 200 block of West Gay Street by St. Agnes for the same reason. So another anecdotal thing that I've heard is we talk a lot about the noise in town, traffic noise. I know Mayor Norley and Chief Moorhead worked a lot on that. We always talk about like they kind of do the circuit or the loop of coming down Gay Street, swinging around Market. When Gay Street's closed, it really takes away the ability for the joyriders to do that. And we see a decrease, not only I think on Gay Street, but also on Market Street because they can't really make a whole show out of everything.
that's one that you could say is anecdotally, but I'm gonna just put all my gut reaction. Like, yes, that changes the noise in town a lot. It makes it so much more bearable for people, for pedestrians and people sitting outside dining.
And one other consideration just that is not reflected in the survey though is deliveries and trash collection. It does become cumbersome to try because, you know, High Street is one thing because it's a wider street and with the turn lane, you can kind of move trucks around there. But for folks who are getting deliveries like on Church Street, it blocks up. And, you know, especially for those at that intersection, they do see a lot more just trucks idling, sitting there, the refrigeration trucks. That is a logistical concern that we should take into account as well.
And I know depending on what solutions we come up with, bollards or not bollards, there are other solutions to that obviously would have you in the conversation. I know talking to oh my goodness, Burlington, Vermont, who has one, they have like removable bollards and they say these hours are your delivery hours. When you remove them, those trucks can come in and out and then they put them back up. So it's just kind of like a systematic way they figured out.
Right. And Public Works will need to be part of this conversation as well, because I mean, we've seen with the Pico work on Gay Street, you know, the contractor told me that there's more stuff underneath our streets on Gay Street than there is in Center City, Philadelphia. So logistically, in trying to fit something that retracts into the ground, that could prove difficult as well. So.
And I think also, sorry, if you guys want to say anything else, I'm kind of taking up time here. This conversation changes, especially this one right here, when what time of year, if we take control of that street, I think it gives us a lot more leeway. I guess it's all the leeway to say we want to do it this weekend in December for like a winter fest or something, and we're going to close it down. So I think when we have the ability to do it, the conversation changes. So I think that's something that just we'll have to wait on, but you know.
And that's, I mean, I think that's why moving forward with, even if whatever we decide, council decides here on an open air market concept, just being able to do community events a little simpler with, you know, local approval is going to be a big thing, because the bid would like to engage in more community events going forward to attract more people to town. So that would be a boon for us as well. So.
My next step, I guess the chief's going to talk about this too, but talk about something too. But I think we need to decide as council, or at least as this committee right now, how are we going to have this discussion? Like, what's the next step? We're going to just keep coming back to committees. I think public safety is one place. I think Smart Growth should tackle this. Public Works for sure. So I think we're going to need to come up with some kind of a plan on how we're actually going to deal with all these questions. You know. So, but I'm sorry, Chief Martin.
I'll be very brief. Jeff, can you go to PSO? Top, yes, down to page 2. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, as John stated, you know, deliveries are a huge deal. Emergency services are even a bigger. handicap, people moving in and out of the blocks. So the police department, who works very well with Homeland Security and the Secret Service, has had a number of discussions on this topic in light of what occurred in 2020. Bin blocks were a temporary solution. Routing of traffic was a solution, but not, actually an engineered solution. 2020, that traffic shift worked because everybody stayed at home. 2021, we saw a much different traffic flow because everybody was out and moving. So Chestnut Street did not work as well as 2020. So we got to really take a look at that. Ambulances are getting all clogged up trying to get to the west side of town.
Is it specifically like Chestnut, the curve around to get into Chestnut? Is that
Gay Street to Matlack to
Yeah.
Chestnut, that specifically, and then High Street became more of a clog as well. So those are all things to work on. When and if council makes a decision to do temporary closures or permanent closures, the bin blocks, they were relatively inexpensive. They were a solution, but I think we can all agree they're not aesthetically pleasing. So something like this, police department's researched. Jeff, if you scroll down to the bottom of that page, this would be a system that the police department recommends. We're looking at 4 to 5 ballards per street end closing. You're not looking at forklifts and tractor trailers to bring stuff in. You're talking about a public works heavy duty vehicle with 2 employees. They can take the locking mechanism, drop it into the ground, lock it in place. Yes, there's infrastructure work that's got to take place underground for these. But once they're in place, the good thing is during a fire or during a move or during PICO work, we can choose to block off certain blocks, part of blocks. We can open blocks for delivery, and you're looking at 2 employees to remove bollards at a street end, or firefighters or police officers to remove those in a hurry just by a combination to remove those from the ground so the ambulance or the fire truck can get down the street. So this is an effective solution because obviously my biggest fear, my biggest concern are vehicle-borne type of attacks, and they do make quality grade stuff similar to what you mentioned in Vermont that is meant specifically for this, but gives the town a very pleasing look. And then, I just wanted to cover that we've done some research on the newest bollard type. We do have pricing, but again, cart way before the horse. This is where Al and Public Works and Mr. Metric down the road here, we're really going to have to sit down, and the mayor, council, and really going to have to do some thought into engineering this. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. I think aesthetically, that's also the best option. So, thoughts on that? Any comments on that? Or
They are not. No, they're studded. They don't have any real vehicle rating for stopping vehicles. Similar in appearance, but they have no security to them.
When this,
I should say they have limited security. Did have a crash right here at Matlack and Yay, and the bollard did stop the vehicle, but it's not a guarantee.
I guess it was before the first closure, as you remember, I had some issues with the barriers, and I did some research on these things, and I thought, wow, that's great. But I thought what would even be greater is if they could all be mechanized, so you could just flip a switch like in these states.
Oh, they make those too. Just get the checkbook out for those. Yeah.
I think it's aesthetically pleasing. It's easy to work, and it seems like it would do the job. Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you. Maynor?
Thanks, Chief Moorhead, and thanks, John O'Brien, for all your work there. And like you said, Mr. Stefano, this is going to be a multi-pronged approach. This obviously isn't going to be in place for 2022, probably not 2023. It's going to be significant capital expenditure. So there's a lot of planning that needs to go on. I do think surveying the residents might be a good next step. We could talk to the university about helping with something like that. And then perhaps a consultant at some point, maybe using the, American Recovery Act monies or something in 2022 to help kind of project this and see what this looks like, something like that to, planning for the long term. So we do have that permanent solution. We're working towards that, something along those lines. I think kind of if you were to look at the majority of everything, I think vast majority of businesses, 80% do like a closure of some sort. And if you were to distill it further down than that, it looks like a Thursday through Sunday sort of situation, partial hours. And then also somewhere between, spring and through fall, or, somewhere in between seems like what the broad kind of business consensus is, more or less. And anecdotally through people I've talked to, which have been a lot of residents in the last year, it is a very, very, very popular with the residents, some capacity. Finally, something that council will need to start to consider is, because this isn't going to be in place, what does next year look like? So that's the other kind of more urgent question that probably have to look like the last couple of years.
Yeah,
if we were going to do something like that.
Yeah, that seems more or less likely, I think, for next year. I think you're right. Council needs to make maybe like a short-term decision for next year. What are we going to do going forward, at least in the short term? And I think it looks like you're right. A look at kind of like what it looked like this year. Maybe we have to look into some other aspects or things we need to, that we could actually work on in the short term. But I think you're right. Those long-term things, we're going to have to really begin the process, but that's going to be almost like a separate thing, like short term and then the long term. So,
Thank you.
go ahead, Bill.
Yeah.
I think that would
Yes.
be a big one.
Probably the planning and engineering studies and sorts of things. Consultants.
Any traffic changes we'd have to make would probably cost some money, as well as getting consultant for that too, I would think. Yeah.
Well, the Bollinger solution, if they're able to be put in, that's $1 million question. There's like a couple folks have already said this evening, there's a lot of stuff under K Street and under sections, as Pico knows and Aqua know, shovel in the ground or something. So it's just not as easy as, digging a hole, sticking a pole in the ground.
I mean, I'm not an expert in the field, but I think it's a little more complicated.
Yeah, it's a
than
little
that.
there's other hurdles we have to jump through. First one is what I've been trying to do for this year, is to try to get the borough's control of blocks of Gay Street. I have control of that yet. It's a hurdle. We're moving forward. We've made some progress. significant progress. Feds are willing to relinquish some of the roads and maybe swap some other roads and negotiate some of that information so far. It's not done. District 6 signed off the same thing. All the information has been sent to in Harrisburg. Their blessings. If they bless it, and then negotiations planning to do is something that they've never. That may, anytime you're dealing with government, you have something new, it freaks out. But I think it'll get done. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take. Has to go to the feds right now. The process takes about 8 months to get anything. Started 8 months ahead of time, 2 years in a row. Some bowers up there too.
So does that mean that, if we wanted another temporary closure, start that conversation?
No.
Trying, and PennDOT's in favor of this. They're trying to get this thing forward so we don't have to go through the same process. It's a lot of work on their end too, dealing with the feds back and forth. So I should know better probably in another 30 days of what's happening. Sending back concurrence letters, but so.
But
One of those-
if it does
one of
go-
those one of those wait and sees, and and I don't want to consider and say it's going to be approved because PennDOT gets agitated if they hear tape when you say stuff like that. It happens, everybody will know.
Okay.
Fair
So,
enough.
yeah, go ahead, Mr. Scott. We could. I think we could decide that. I think. Yeah. And I think we are in the short term for like next year, we're definitely going to make these decisions probably soon. I would assume. Yeah. Maybe even before the end of the year. I don't know. I mean, Mr. O'Brien, what do you think? Do you think that's something we should to get the ball rolling now? Or do you think I think we're in a holding pattern because we don't know whether we're going to have control of the street or not. So.
Yeah, I think that until that gets settled, I think that is the first domino. But whether, council wants to put together more of a working group in terms of whether it's, the bid, somebody from Public Works, the police department, to at least on paper write down for council, these are the challenges and the problems and questions that need to be answered by council, so that you have a document or something very specific, which we need like yes, no's or on that. That might be a helpful step that we could start on now, so at least we understand, instead of just all very hypothetical perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Does that work for you, Mr. Braceland? I don't have any problem with it. Let's do it. I think we're going to do it. That's the general consensus.
I
So we
mean,
just need
it
that.
might not be a bad idea to, John just said, have maybe a working group.
Yeah.
Instead of coming here for a half an hour,
Yeah.
some stakeholders involved
Yeah.
and to council with a recommendation on, based on the surveys.
Okay. Yeah. No. So definitely. Yeah. Okay. I agree. I think it's a good idea. Just have somebody bring something and say this is okay. Yeah. Your last hurrah, he said.
This time around.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have a temporary task force if you want. Appointment of those people are, or council can look at that next week. Have a recommendation maybe from administration on who should be included in that, and council could just appoint that group, whatever you want to do.
Okay. Let's look for that recommendation then. That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The working group, I think, is the best place to do it because this takes up a lot of our meeting so.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot simpler if FID just kind of together who John thinks would be good, obviously the police department, public works, or administration. A couple businesses, if anybody on council wants to sit in, it's fine. It's just, this does not need to be formal. It's just.
Yeah,
let's-
I'd rather it not be formal at this point, especially for the short term. Yeah.
Yeah, we're comfortable taking lead on that if that's what the committee would like us to do.
I would. What do you think?
But you got to keep the group small.
That, I
The last
agree.
time,
We do want to keep it
You
to
know how I was
a
with the last.
a
task
group
force.
that can be a decision-making body.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
call.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah,
I agree with
You
you.
need
Lessons learned, yes.
cooks that know what they're talking about.
Sure.
good call, Mr.
Okay.
I agree.
Well, thank you.
All right. We are going to move on because we're running a little late. Does anybody have any other comments about this? All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 8, which is approving our September 2021 minutes. They looked great to me. So that's a 3-0 recommendation for that. Number 9 is other business. I see no other business, so we are adjourned. Thank you.